Yo, what's up, guys? It's your boy HMSA 2012 here, back at it again, but this time with more of a discussion video in regards to how to climb the menacing Pokemon Showdown ladder. Now, this could apply to nearly any ladder, if not almost all of them. There are a few exceptions, of course. There is the random battle ladder, which it can go either way. But for this video, I'm going to be using the OU ladder as it's my primary tier that I usually have been playing. Um, I also play Ubers, a bit of UU, a little Cup as well. But OU is, I think, one of the perfect examples to start building your way to the top of the ladder. So first things first, before you ever start thinking about laddering, let's say you're starting now. This is gonna be for people who are starting the ladder all the way from the beginning, like clean 1000 rank. So it's like the bottom of the bottom. There are a couple of resources that you can actually use to get ahead of everyone else. So, Smogon has here, obviously, there is the OU forum. There's a lot of cool different tools that you can actually use in order to get ahead of the game. We have like tournaments that are coming on, and I actually will be talking about tournaments and how they affect the ladder. We also have a couple resources, which are the OU viability ranking thread. You can see what Pokemon are currently that have great viability, what are not. You can actually see replays of tournaments, or the most recent tournaments. Like this is the OU Premier League. You get to see cool top tournament OU players competing, and you get to see the teams that they build and the logic behind their strategies and turn-by-turn play. We also have sample teams here, and I'm actually gonna pull this up right here as well because I want to talk about sample teams because they do actually have some sort of effect on the ladder as well. We also have OU speed tiers. If you don't know how fast the Pokemon can possibly be, this is a perfect thread that you can use. And we also have some pretty cool things here as well. There are like team building competitions. There's random tournaments that aren't necessarily OU. There are also some ultra uh, ultra sun and moon cores that they're really effective and that have been you know really placed in the meta. There's a lot of cool stuff. But first and foremost, when thinking about laddering, the first thing I would do, or everyone should do, in my opinion, is to check out the sample teams. No, let's see, wrong threads. Here you go. So the sample teams here are basically teams that have been used in tournaments or had recent success on the ladder. I believe these first three teams here have actually been used in tournaments before. This Mega Gallade bulky offense team was actually used in SPL recently, if I remember. And then the rest of these teams are like ladder slash tournament use. But what's so great about these teams is that you can instantly, you know, upload the importable, slap it into your team builder, and you're good to go for the first part of the ladder. So you have nice hyper offense screens by Coco, and you have a bunch of setup Pokemon. You also have this type as well. So we're gonna talk about mostly like there are usually 4 archetypes of Pokemon teams that are currently seen in ladders, but it's more like a spectrum. And so from the very very left, you have nice hyper offense, and hyper offense, as you can probably tell by its name, and I'll give you an example of a team here, which I saw. All right, here it is. So a hyper offensive team, as you can see, is a Pokemon, a team of Pokemon that have a couple of functions. One of them is primarily setting up a defensive measure for your team to start setting up. So, for example, the Tapu Koko in this instance is dual screens, which is light screen and reflect. And once it has its own both screens set up, it will most likely will pivot into either a Landorus, Hawlucha, or any other Pokemon that can basically start setting up itself. So, for example, Landorus can be dual dance with Swords Dance or Rock Polish. Lucha with its Electric Seed and Terrain means it's gets double the speed, and it can set up swords dances. Zygarde can either do a dragon dance or coil set. Magearna, usually its setup is with Calm Mind or Shift Gear, and the classic Mega Gyarados with Dragon Dance. The next archetype is usually uh, bulky offense. Now, bulky offense is a little bit, as you can probably tell by its name, that it's still of an offensive-oriented team, but also it's capable of sweeping on its own. Volcanora is a perfect example as to what a bulky offense is. It has somewhat good defenses, not great phys def, obviously, but it's able to set up and start blowing teams away because of its coverage moves. It can run hidden power ground. It can run hidden power ice, depending on matchups. Uh, Sidekick for the Psyche Z to blow Toxapex away at +1. Tyranitar is also another good example of a bulky offense. It has the defensive capabilities to pursue trap, and the ability to take hits as well, punish switch-ins with pursuits, etc. Zapdos is primarily one of the best defoggers in offensive-oriented teams. Again, it has the defensive stats to take a couple hits. It can defog away hazards, which is primarily one of its greatest aspects. Ferrothorn. Now, you might be wondering, well, how is Ferrothorn offensive? Well, not necessarily true. Bulky offense doesn't mean that every single Pokemon has to be offensive. Ferrothorn, what it brings to the table is a defensive backbone along with Zapdos. And what I mean by that is that it can set up hazards, stealth rocks, spikes primarily. It can spread status if it has toxic or Thunder Wave. It can knock off. It can leech seed. So pretty much, it's a like these two develop a backbone, a defensive backbone for a bulky offense team to do its thing. Ash Greninja, you all know what it does. The Choice Specs set is the most common set. It pretty much once once the opposing team is weakened, Ash Greninja can pick it off and it starts becoming a threat. And Landorus, you can see Landorus is pretty common in OU. It can be a defensive pivot. It can be a Z user as well. If you don't want Volcanora to be your Z user, it can do everything, literally everything except healing itself up. And then the next team on the spectrum is Balance. So Balance, as you can probably tell, is that there's Pokemon that are able to synergize each other based on their offensive and defensive capabilities, but usually they don't present much of an offensive threat in the beginning of a match. So, for example, Tapu Bulu, usually we know of it as an offensive capabilities due to grassy terrain. However, they're usually run with the Assault Vest variant, which is basically nearly max HP and some EVs in Spadef, attack, and speed. Its main nature's madness allows it to break through threats that its fellow companions can take care of. And Toxapex is there to set up T-spikes to wear down the opposing checks. Kartana is the Choice Scarf user on the team, if I believe. Yes, it's able to defog. It's able to break through your team. It's your primary offensive mon. And Landorus could be your defensive backbone, settling stealth rocks. Magnezone can be your trapper. It can be the Choice Specs. It could be the Z user as well. And then you have Mega Latios, which is an offensive threat. So overall, as Balance, it says like half your team is defensive, half your team is offensive, but mostly it's in between. And they really depend on wearing down the opponent over time to the point that the threats like Kartana and Mega Latios are able to pick off and sweep. And then last we have on the right side of the spectrum is Stall. As you guys know, Stall is usually 6 defensive mons so it's 6 defensive mons. Their primary ability is to annoy you. What I've seen recently with Stall, Celesteela and not Celesteela, sorry, Mega Sableye is one of the most common Pokemon you will see install, simply because it has the ability to be fat and an ability to be annoying at first. Before its Mega Evolution, Sableye can have the Prankster ability, which is usually the best ability it should be, and it should be running the ability. It can taunt, it can Willow to basically set up Pokemon. It can wreak havoc against physical attackers. And once it Mega Evolves, obviously now it becomes a Pokemon with hazard control. It just bounces everything that isn't a non-direct damage move. Chansey, another staple to stall. It's max super fat HP, and it's a really great special defense along with Eviolite. Allows it to prevent special sweepers from wrecking havoc. Volcanora cannot break Chansey unless it has been set up at like a plus 4 even 5, but even at plus 4 or 5, I think it doesn't kill from full. Tangrowth is usually somewhat of another mon. You don't. It's not really much of a Pokemon you will see install. Usually has the Assault Vest or Rocky Helmet variants. It's usually it's all out attacker, meaning it has 4 attacking moves: Knock Off, Giga Drain, Hidden Power Ice / Hidden Power Fire, Earthquake, and the rare Sludge Bomb for opposing Tapu Bulus. Gliscor, which is an interesting Pokemon, after it got defogged, has been rising in the viability rankings lately. It actually has been seen in a couple of SPL matches and OST, which is the official Smogon tournament, and it's currently on the team that won semifinals in the Smogon Tour 25. So it's a really cool mon. It's also defensive. It's kind of like a mini Landorus, but it has a great ability in healing itself with Poison Heal, with the Toxic Orb. Has great base HP and great defenses overall. Immunity to ground and electric makes it a really interesting mon install. And also it can set up rocks. It can be a Swords Dance Facade variant. It's pretty great mon all around. And usually with stall, Toxapex has always been the annoying mon. Bulky enough to take hits and can recover. It can set up T-spikes to wear down opposing checks. Scald to burn if it gets lucky. And all in all, it's just a very annoying mon. So those are like pretty much the 4 types of teams that you will be expecting to play against on the ladder. From my experience, bulky offense is what I've mostly have played against in the ladder. Hyper offense is not rarely played, but it's not favorable right now due to stall becoming really annoying in the higher ups of the ladder, and also hyper offense is more of a based on predictions. Like you have to predict right, or otherwise you're gonna be falling behind. Your mons don't really have enough defense to take hits, so it's really predictable based, and you just gotta know how to handle it. But if you can handle hyper offense, avoid getting worn down by checks and hazards, should be good to go. But balance is usually bulky offense is the primary team that I would usually see on the ladder. So now you know what kind of teams are on the ladder. Now you got to know, well, what Pokemon are great. And here it is. This is the Smogon OU viability rankings. This is a really great thread. And I got to give a shout out to Smogon for actually doing this, because it tells you what Pokemon are the best. And not necessarily the best, but overall, like offensive, defensive capabilities, move sets, its versatility, its utilization on the OU ladder as well. So Landorus, the king of OU, you guys heard of this mon? If you haven't, you must be living under a rock. But the reason why Landorus is partially S rank is because it can do everything except recover itself. If it somehow gained Roost, I think it would be an Uber right now. I think it'd be straight up banned from OU. But Landorus can set up rocks. It can be a Z user. It can be a Scarf. It can even be the random choice band set. It can be Dual Dance. It can be Focus Sash Lead Explosion. It can be a defensive scarf. It can be offensive. It can be leftovers toxic. It can do everything. And that's why it's an S ranked mod in OU. And then following that with Pokemon such as Heatran and Kartana. Now you might be wondering, well, Heatran, you know, what does Heatran do? How does it deserve an S minus rank? Well, Heatran is able to trap Pokemon. It can set up rocks. It can taunt slower, fat Pokemon. And it has access to Earth power. It can have the Firium Z, the Grassium Z. Pretty much a good mon all around. And so does Kartana. Kartana mostly is, I think it's the best Scarfer in OU. It also has access to the Choice Band set, which hits like a truck if you're not very careful with it. It can be the SD plus Z user as well. And especially paired with Tapu Bulu and Grassy Terrain, Leaf Blades are going to hurt. The Z moves are definitely going to hurt. So the viability rankings overall tells you like what kind of Pokemon are very viable right now as we speak. And what's great about the viability rankings is that there are players in the thread that can actually they actually recommend nominating a Pokemon higher up or even dropping them down, because some Pokemon, might be not as great as they used to be or not as used as they were. For example, Toxapex, I believe, was an S ranked mon because it was just the best fat mon in the game. But because of the rising surge of bulky offense and the rise of Heatran, because it can trap and taunt and earth power it to death, Toxapex's viability went down by just to the A plus. But you can see like the kind of mons in the different rankings. Like you can see Mega Medicham is A. If you go down one, Hoopa Unbound, Mega Latios, and Mega Latios. And also another thing with the viability ranking is that a lot of these Pokemon isn't just necessarily based on ladder usage, but also in tournament usage as well. Latios and Hoopa Unbound and Gliscor are like the perfect examples of Pokemon rising in usage because of tournament play, because they have a unique set or two that can help define a team. So you can go down the ladder. Gastrodon, a PU Pokemon. PU. One of the lowest ranked tiers, Gastrodon is OU because it's able to check a lot of common threats such as Tapu Koko, Ash Greninja. It can also check, I believe, Landorus if it's defensive, a Fizdef. It can check Keldeos. It can be your wall, a kind of a semi-wall terrain. It's a pretty good mon from a bad tier. Reuniclus was one of those mons that was seen a lot in SPL usage. In fact, I think it was a super underrated mon in SPL. It was able to set up. It can blow Pokemon away with stab psychics, with calm minds. It can recover. Has access to leftovers. Magic Guard prevents it from getting damage, just like Clefable. Focus Blast to hit opposing Tyrannotars if they want to play that game. So that's what the viability rankings do. Going down the viability rankings obviously means the Pokemon isn't as viable as they are in the OU, but they still can be used. Let's not get mistaken. Like, these Pokemon can still be used in OU. However, they're not as seen or as viable as they are because there are other Pokemon that either do better jobs at what they do, or simply because they get checked by a lot of opposing threats. So after that, so now you know what kind of Pokemon you see are viable on the ladder. So now you're wondering, well, how do I build the good sets with the best Pokemon? Now, this is where the OU set viability rankings. So just like in the viability rankings themselves, you can see the rankings of different Pokemons based on their movesets. Again, we're going to go back to our Big Daddy Landorus T. It's able to be a defensive pivot, a bulky Choice Scarf user, offensive Choice Scarf user. It can run, I think, up to 3 Z moves. It's a Focus Sash Lead Explosion. You have Heatran being Utility Trapper, Kartana with Choice Scarf, and the list goes on and on. Greninja, Choice Specs is a really great set for it because it can Revenge Kill with Water Shuriken or just blow non-resisted Pokemon away. Tapu Koko has recently had a surge in the Shuka Berry set where it just baits in a Landorus or Zygarde, so they think that it can Earthquake slash Thousand Waves it to death. But then Shuka allows it to set off 2 HP ices and kill its threat. And you can see, just like in the Pokemon thread, it goes down as the more viable Pokemon with their sets continue to just go down. Like you see Keldeo, is a B ranked Pokemon with a Calm Mind and Taunt being its B plus, or more viable, and then Choice Specs is C plus. But also another thing is that 7th gen also introduced a super power creep in the form of the Tapus. Because of the Tapus themselves, Fairy being a very great offensive slash defensive typing, a lot of Pokemon's viability has went down ever since the end of ORAS. And Keldeo is the perfect example, and that's the reason why the Choice Spec set isn't as great as it used to be, because Pokemon such as Tapu Fini or Tapu Bulu can just switch in on it and barely take anything. So yeah, overall, the viability rankings, the the set viability rankings, and the sample teams are like the best resources you can use to conquer the ladder. So now you gained all that information. Now it's time to understand how the ladder works. If you ever want to end up all the way here in the top 10, in the top 500, which is around the 1700s, you got to understand how the ladder works. So, and actually, I'm gonna pull up some teams here so you guys can see. Oh, actually, this is perfect. So, in the first part of the ladder, we consider the low ladder. This low ladder encompasses of ranks 1,000 all the way to 1,500. So it's a really big gap between the low and the middle ladder. So what do you often see in the low ladder? Well, it's a lot of people trying out new teams. You're not going to see any crazy OU defining teams unless known players are restarting their accounts and they're just doing a road to top 10 or whatever. But usually what you will see are gimmicky teams, Pokemon that you don't really ever usually see in the OU meta. And so a team that's often successful in the ladder are teams that are one-dimensional. And what I mean by that is that they just pretty much are offensive, hyper offensive. They just get the work done as fast as possible because you want to get over all those games. Because getting to the 1500s is where you'll see the level of play continue, getting better and better. And obviously, as you rank up through the low ladder, the quality of opponents get better and better. But a good team to use in the lower ladder is HO Rain. Now, this is a classic team that has been used in tournaments before and has been seen in mid ladder. But this is a great team that you can use in the low ladder. And what it does, as you can probably tell by its name, is that Pelipper sets up the rain and allows the sweepers of Mega Swampert and Kingdra to just blow through teams that cannot check rain threats. You have Ferrothorn that's giving you utility in knockoff and spikes, hazards. You have Tapu Koko, which can actually lock an opponent from switching a Mon, and it can just simply destroy fat Mons that can be problematic against your team. And then if the rain threats have been weakened or are unable to battle, you can also use Hawlucha plus Koko Electric Terrain in order to start sweeping with Swords Dance. So overall, it's like HO. You just keep attacking your opponent. Because in a low ladder, you don't want to stay there forever. And sometimes the battles go by really fast with these kinds of teams. So yeah, this is like a perfect example. Just running HO is primarily a good tip I would give when starting out the ladder, all the way to the 1500s. So once you reach the 1500s, you're like, okay, we got out of the basement. Now we're in the first floor of the. Now we're in the mid. We call it the mid-low ladder. So What we mean by that is that first, the quality of the teams get better and better, and obviously the quality players start getting better and better as well. And so what you will see primarily in the 1500s is mostly some mixture of hyper offense and bulky offense. I guess this would be the perfect team that you can actually use for 1500s. And what we mean by mid ladder is now we consider 1500 through the 1700s. So it's a little less of an iteration of the lower ladder. It's actually a smaller gap than the lower ladder, but this is where your play has to start increasing. Now you have to start predicting your opponent's moves. You have to know how to preserve your team more often. Be wary that hazards can become a problem now. And there aren't usually any gimmicky teams, but if you run into them after your experience in the low ladder, you can now know how to deal with them. So this is a bulky offense team that I've been using in the 1500s. It's been successful. Shout out to Dockridge for this team. You have Scizor, which is one of the best defensive defoggers in the game that can pivot. It can heal itself. Great mod. You have Tapu Koko that can check threats that aren't water resist or ground immune or that don't resist electric types or ground type Pokemon that just straight up outright are immune to it. You have Landorus, the common Pokemon in OU. You have an Amoonguss that can check offensive Ash Greninjas. It can bait in Heatran. That's what the Stomping Tantrums are for, to weaken it. You have Keldeo, who, as you saw, is a B+ mon, but it can still do the job with its Calm Mind plus Taunt. And with Water Z, it can just blow away Pokemon that don't resist it. And then Pokemon such as Victini, you don't really see it in OU, but the Choice Band set with V-Create can just blow through coverage of teams that cannot resist V-Create. And I'll give you another example of a team that you can use in the 1500s. And in fact, they're also going to be, like I said, some gimmicky teams. But usually I don't consider this team gimmicky. Let's see if I can find it here. Oh no, where is it? Where is that? Oh, here it is. So you'll start. So in the 1500s, you're going to start seeing another variation of team composition, which is Trick Room. And Trick Room is essentially, if you don't know what Trick Room does, it's basically a move that has like the lowest priority. A Pokemon sets it up. All slow Pokemon attack first in the 4 turns that Trick Room is up. So you have offensive capabilities with Stack Attacka. The Gyro Ball is has one of the most powerful Gyro Balls in the game. You have Cresselia that's just bulky. It can take so many hits. It can set up Trick Room. It can heal itself. It can Lunar Dance if you wanna heal up your offensive threats alive. You have Magearna, which is overall one of the best Trick Room setters in the game. Its multitude of moves and its diversity allows it to run any Z crystal of your choice. Crawdon, it can be, with its adaptability, just hits like a truck if not taken care of. You have Mega Camerupt, which I think is one of the best special attacking offensive Trick Room Pokemon in the game. And last but not least, Azu, which is one of the great staples of Trick Room. Its Choice Band plus its huge power just destroys things that cannot switch into it. So in the 1500s and through 1700s, you will see sometimes Trick Room. Trick Room is still viable. It's more of an anti-meta kind of pick of a team. It can just throw a lot of people off of their wheels sometimes. So now you start seeing the quality of play. You're starting to notice that gimmicky teams in the 15 through 1700s or the middle ladder are now, they're less common. And you start seeing a molding of the ladder. Now you're starting to see more bulky offense and balance teams. So now you're gonna be you have achieved the 1700s, and the 1700s is essentially you're in the range of the top 500 of the ladder, which is a great accomplishment, but it's not good enough. You want to keep going more. So once you start hitting the 1700s, you'll be noticing various trends as well. mostly you'll start playing against very high quality players, and not just ladder heroes, but also tournament players as well, who wanna understand how the meta is works, how do they get their teams to form during tournaments. This is a good example of a team. Shout outs to Smoke on Threads as well. Uh, this is an example of a team that you can see in the 1700s through, I would say, the 2000s, and that's the high ladder. And so it's kind of funny. The ladder is kind of like a sandwich. You have the base, which is pretty big, 500-point difference. Then you have the middle ladder, which is about 200, and then you have the high ladder, the 17 to 2000, which is a 300-point differential. And once you hit that, the high part of the ladder, you'll start noticing a couple of trends. The first trend you will notice is that a lot of teams have become balanced in a sort. There's going to be a mixture of offense and defensive cores. Uh, Hyper offense is nearly non-existent simply because they can get worn down very easily and can be checked heavily against bulky offensive, balanced offense, and even stall. And speaking of stall, you won't see stall much in the lower ladder, nor much in, if not at all, in the lower ladder. You won't see it as much in the middle ladder, but in the high ladder, stall is somewhat prevalent. So you got to have a team that's ready to check defensive cores: Chansey, Toxapex, Mega Sableye, Cresselia, Zapdos. Those kinds of mons that you want to make sure your team is able to check. And Heatran is one of the best Pokemon that can trap an offensive mon. With Magma Storm, it can taunt it to prevent it from doing any shenanigans and just Earth Power, or keep Magma Storming away to kill it when it's trapped. But overall, in the 1700, in the high ladder, I should say, you will see a lot of balanced teams. You won't see much hyper offensive teams, but if they are, the most prevalent hyper offensive teams are Aurora Veil. So Alolan Ninetales plus 5 setup sweepers. And as I mentioned in the high ladder as well, there won't be as much gimmicky teams you will see in the high ladder, but if you do, get ready for them. This one is one that I have used recently, and it's really, really cool team. It, as you can see from it, Hoopa Unbound, Blacephalon, Tapu Lele, Whimsicott, Mew, Tornadus, incarnate form. This is a Tailwind hyper offensive team. Those are these kinds of teams you will never ever see high up in the ladder unless it has gained the following of people. And that's another good thing about the ladder too. Like, an interesting aspect of ladder is that if a team does really well in tournaments or has seen success in its rises, for example, I believe this team has peaked in the 1900s, like 1930s. A lot of people will start picking it up due to its innovation, the way it looks, the way it functions. As a tailwind isn't really something of a mechanism in OU, but when it's used appropriately with the right Pokemon, it can become a very threatening team. So Choice Specs, Blacephalon, and Hoop Unbound can just blow through teams that aren't don't have Tyranitar essentially. um, and obviously with the high ladder, there's also going to be stalls, so you got to prepare for it. But high up in the ladders, you'll also start noticing Pokemon that are capable of just one Pokemon that's capable of destroying everything. Kyurem Black is the perfect example. With Ice Beam Z, with Free Shock, something is gonna die, and if it resists it, it's gonna die anyways. You'll start noticing sets that aren't viable or aren't common. For example, Scarf Tapu Koko is used to bait out Scarf Garchomps, which is not even viable right now in OU. Or Scarf, any Scarfers that are slower than, slower than 130 base speed. And you have Landorus, obviously common. Celesteela, the nice defensive backbone. Mew is a very interesting mon as well because it can do everything and literally everything. It can help your team become a defensive backbone. It can be offensive sweeper with screens. And then Greninja. Protean Greninja is a Pokemon that I've enjoyed using in the high end of the ladder. Um, Expert Built, I believe, is a interesting choice, but I would prefer Choice Scarf for speed because I already have Choice Scarf on a or we're on top of Coco. I just don't like two Scarfers on the same team unless they're really offensive. But overall, you'll see these kinds of teams as well. And obviously, with the high end of the ladder, you'll start seeing innovative teams, teams that have done well in tournaments, primarily like in SPL, which is the Smogon Premier League. Uh, now, I'll actually bring up a team that has seen success as well. So this team, oh boy, this team. This is a team that was a part of the official Smogon tournament that won it all. You have Gliscor that can be a Swords Dance Facade user. Clefable is one of the best rockers in the games because it just doesn't die. Toxapex is another mod that doesn't die. Megaladios is actually becoming more viable due to its usage in SPL. It can be the Calm Mind Stored Power, which is a disgusting set. It can be an all-out 3 attacks recover Pokemon. Ferrothorn is as great as a defensive backbone because it can set up spikes, it can pass status. And T-Tar, its great ability in pursuit trapping. So these kinds of teams is what you'll be seeing as well, like tournament successful teams high up on the ladder. So now you know what to expect from the ladders. Now you know what sets are viable, what Pokemon are viable. Now you have the successful tools in order to conquer that ladder. So thank you guys for watching. If you guys are interested in more videos, hit that like button and subscribe. Have a wonderful evening, and I hope to upload more videos as we go along. I'll probably upload another video again soon, but this will be mostly focused on other topics that have been going around in the Pokemon community. So thank you guys, and goodbye.